I'm Dr. John Hall. And yes, I'm real. I know at every one of these conferences I go to, I get asked, do you really exist? Yes, I really exist. It is difficult for medical doctors. I know a lot of you have been to your medical doctors with complaints about this. It's a very difficult setting for a licensed physician to deal with this. Most of our medical boards, at least in the States, mine particularly, has told me that anybody that comes to you voicing problems of targeting, if you don't send them to a psychiatrist, you're committing medical malpractice. So for those of you that I know a lot of you see your physicians, and you think, oh my God, my physician must be involved in this because they won't listen to me. A lot of it is they're probably doing you a favor, because if they do listen to you, most of them are going to have to refer you to a psychiatrist who's going to victimize you a second time. I'm not a big proponent of psychiatry in any fashion. You would know that if you've read my books. Who are the targeted? We've done a lot of research to kind of get statistics based on who is being targeted and how they're being targeted. Are there any certain groups? That's me. I do have to tell you, based on board experience, that this lecture does not constitute a doctor-patient relationship and does not constitute medical advice. And that's what many of your physicians that are going to see you in your country or in the United States may tell you the same thing, because we are being told to refer TIs to psychiatrists, which most of us think that's a wrong thing to do, because we know you'll get victimized the second time by a psychiatrist. These are my two books. A New Breed was a culmination of me helping a victim in San Antonio, Texas, from 2000 to 2006. The book released in 2008. Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control, released about a year ago. I know both of these books are blacklisted in the United States. They can't be ordered on government computers. That should tell you something. I don't know what their availability is like in Europe, but I know they are carried on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. But several of my government friends in the States have told me that they are blacklisted on government computers in the United States. We're going to be moving kind of quickly here, as I know we're behind on time, so I'm going to be covering a lot of ground here pretty quickly. These are some of the things you're seeing in the United States. There is an awareness campaign that's been going on there. Educating the non-targeted public is essential in success in this fight. Every one of you are soldiers on the front line of a battlefield that's trying to control our free will. I'm glad you're all here, because hopefully you'll come away with some knowledge that you can go back home with and try to continue this campaign of awareness. It's imperative that the non-targeted public understand that this technology exists. It's the non-targeted public, your family members, your physicians, your clergy that doesn't understand this, that are referring you to psychiatrists. And most psychiatrists don't understand this. They're financially driven. They're not going to look at the stack of papers you bring in from your Google search. They're not going to read my books. They're not going to listen to your stories. They're going to hear, you're hearing voices and you're being attacked by unseen weapons, and you're going to get a diagnosis, so you get roped into seeing that doctor once a month for $300 an hour and placed on beds that don't work. This is I'm going to take questions at the end, because I've already been told I got to fly through this. This is ISA Act. ISA Act was formed actually by Jesse Beltran. Mr. Beltran came to me in Austin, Texas. He was there on a business conference and knew that I existed, and got a hold of me by email and said, I hear you're doing scanning and research with targeted individuals. Can you meet me in Austin and scan me? I've got these symptoms going on. I need to know what's going on. I met him in Austin. We did preliminary radio frequency scanning. He did come up hot in certain areas. We got the appropriate imaging, found that he was indeed implanted. He took the next step to form ISA Act in California, which I'm a board member, which the goal of ISA Act was to view this as an act of terror and an act of human rights crime, and kind of try to assemble as many PhDs, medical doctors, victims, people that with any type of expertise they could contribute to fighting this battle, through ISA Act. This is the pledge that ISA Act says that this is a crime against humanity. It is a form of terrorism, and that's kind of the standpoint we come from in ISAC. We do have some statistics. These statistics kind of follow the statistics you've seen that have come out of Europe. Statistics that have also come out of surveys done by Freedom from Covert Surveillance and Harassment. These are our own statistics. We've had 2,385 participants that have undergone RF testing. 500 of the individuals were non-targets or were not complaining of targeting symptoms. 68% of the people that were targeted did come up positive on RF scan. If you look at the breakdown, this is important. If you look at the breakdown of people that are being targeted, you'll see roughly 70% are female, roughly 30% or so are male. Almost all of them are either Caucasian or black, and then a smattering of other descents, Hispanic and Native American being the lowest. Most of the female victims were single, separated, or divorced, either way living alone. Really important here to show that the non-symptomatic group, 15% of them did show a positive on RF scan, almost always around the shoulders. Now that's an important finding because that does show that there are some natural signals either coming in or coming out of even non-targeted individuals. One important thing to understand, I kind of started this RF scanning under the surmise that we were looking for chips, that there must be some type of implant for this to be happening, mainly because most of the victims that came to me said, I'm being told I'm implanted and we need to find the implants. And we found some implants in a number of people. Implants of various types. Sometimes they were Verichips, sometimes they were carbon fiber, sometimes they were nanotechnological. But the majority of the people that we scanned that are positive for RF emissions, either coming in or out, majority of them we're not finding implants on, not on any type of imaging that we currently know how to do. And that kind of alludes to what Nick Begich went over, that it doesn't take much energy to change the status of the EEG and change the status of the brain. So I think a lot of this is being done with energy and without a chip. If you are chipped, it's probably a chip to find your placement spatially on the globe, to expose you to a variety of weapons that are part of a weapon system. When I wrote A New Breed, I did have contact with CIA agents that are friends of mine. They were forthright in telling me that yes, they do have these weapons. They weren't real clear on exactly putting voices in the head. They were very clear on their ability to target the nervous system and cause pain and suffering. So these weapons do exist, that's not a myth, and there's plenty of research that leads up to it, from the research on MKUltra to the research that other people have done. MKUltra, this is Sidney Gottlieb. He was the one responsible for most of these projects. It was 4 decades and is still going on. The only thing that stopped was the freedom of information. The research hasn't stopped. What we do know about MKUltra came from financial records. We didn't have the actual research studies. What was released were financial records that he was not able to get to destroy. Most of the experiments were unwitted. Was 149 sub-projects. The amazing thing with this research is it was so complete. They had childhood behavior studies, implant studies, energy studies, adult behavior studies, sexuality studies. They studied just about every part of humanity that can be studied to put the full puzzle together of exactly how to control the human being. It came in related projects. These are some of them. You've seen these over the last 2 days: Bloomberg Artichoke, MK Surge, Monarch, Naomi, and Delta. There's plenty more now. Some of them we don't know. MKUltra is related projects. CIA started this, as Nick Begich said. Every agency in the Department of Defense has its own directed energy consultants. Little joke here, the NSA, the only part of the government that actually listens, at least in the United States. On a separate topic, real quickly, I don't know if any of you watch the news, but we had another mass shooting in the United States. Well, I guess it would have been last night. These are happening quite often. Don't think for a minute that these aren't controlled shootings. The people that have survived, some of the shooters that have survived, most of them have complained about mind control. Here of late, they're usually making sure that they somehow or another figure out a way to kill the shooter. The one most recently did have some troubled internet past and certainly looked like somebody that's controlled. Our government right now wants gun control in the worst way in the United States. And the way they intend on getting that is to continue having these mass shootings, hoping there'll be a public clamor for gun control in the United States. So far, there hasn't been. This is Dr. Jose Delgado. He was the one that started with the STIMO receiver, doing his research, implanting eggs, humans, and any type of animal he could get his hands on. After the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission, to somewhat get the heat off of him and the CIA, he went back to Spain and practiced at the Madrigal Hospital in Spain. Towards his later years, he did come back and was living in LA. Interviews were done with him. Before his death, he did claim that everything he did with implants could now be done with broadcasting. He was very clear on that, and I think toward the end of his life, he was probably being honest. These are three important names. While Delgado was influential on figuring out how to control the mind using stimulation with implants, these three names actually took it the next step. Alan Frey, of course, you know, was the father of microwave auditory effect. He's the one that figured out that you can modulate sound over microwaves. Figured that out when he noticed that people controlling radar installations could tell when those radar units came off and on by hearing clicking in their head. That comes from actually thermoelastic expansion in the middle ear. As it heats up, it actually becomes more acute. They figured out how to modulate sound on that. Initially, you'll see that they were only able to do it with numbers, 1, 2, 3, you could hear. It did go on to actually be able to be modulated to have spoken word. Robert Malik, he actually was the first one to patent the way to remotely monitor the EEG. Michael Persinger has done most of the microwave and extremely low frequency wave research for the Navy. He's still doing his research at Laurentian University in Canada. He claims he can control every mind on the planet using extremely low frequency waves, and he's probably right. This is a breakdown of Malik's patent, and this is important to understand because I think this forms the basis for a lot of what we experience. Basically, that diagram is a electronic diagram saying that the way you monitor the brain is you shoot two dissimilar frequencies into the brain. One hemisphere will entrain one frequency, the other hemisphere will entrain the other frequency. When those collide, they create an interference frequency that actually transmits from the brain. That interference frequency can be received, can be decoded, can be heterodyned, altered, transmitted back into your brain to entrain it, and then give you whatever symptom they want you to display. Whether that's twitching, fast heart rate, anxiety, emotional states, rage, that's been worked with extensively. You have to remember that this patent was in the 70s, basically using bear skins and stone knives to do it. With the increase in technology and the decoding, you can see where some of the research being done at the University of Irvine in California. They're using this same premise, and they're able to have people watch a video, decode the EEG, and then put that memory back into a visual display. So far, and that's in the private sector. You gotta remember, the government sector is years ahead of the private sector, typically in research. Just in the private sector, we can already have you watch a video, decode the EEG from your memory of the video that you saw, and reproduce it on the screen in a visual display. So if you have them sit and watch a video of an airplane landing, you can actually tell them, remember what you saw on the video, decode the EEG, put it back into a visual display, and you will see an airplane landing on the screen based on what they remembered. And that's being done at the University of Irvine. I put this slide up just as a reminder that control comes in a lot of different ways. And we're talking about electronic control today, but these are some of the departments in the United States: the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Department of Education, IRS, EPA, and the FDA. And this is always, at least in the United States when I lecture there, this is always a big surprise. Does anybody have a guess? What do all of these have in common other than their government agencies? What they all have in common is that they've all started having SWAT teams. military armed, Humvee armed, automatic weapons, SWAT teams. Why the Department of Education, the Food and Drug Administration would need SWAT teams, most Americans are wanting to know that. But that's another form of control that we've got coming in the U.S., that all of these government agencies are arming themselves, stockpiling ammo, stockpiling Humvees. And it's concerning to most of us. Like I said, the NSA has taken over most of the surveillance job in the United States. They call it saturation surveillance or total surveillance. Edward Snowden alluded to some of that with his documents. Most of what he alluded to, targeted individuals have been talking about for a decade or more. We were called the tinfoil hat people, the conspiracy theorists. Certainly the government can't read all your emails. Certainly the government can't listen to all your cell phone conversations. Certainly they can't read all your text. Yes, they can. As a matter of fact, the new NSA base built in Utah has supercomputers that Nick Begich talked about that can pretty much monitor just about everything, at least in the United States, all at once. Targeted individuals. From our research, we've kind of narrowed this down to some levels as it occurs. These do have some overlap, but you can kind of break it down into induction, surveillance, stalking, defamation, attack, and maintenance. Induction, meaning how were you picked? Some people are whistleblowers. That's an obvious one. It's the agency that sells that actually induces you. Some people, it may have been you were walking at the grocery store and you just seem like somebody that needs to be a guinea pig, and it's completely random. Most of the time, it seems like it's completely random. Once you're picked to begin the program, there may be 6 months to a year of surveillance before you ever even know what's happening. It didn't happen when you started hearing voices. It didn't happen when you noticed the first attack. It started happening without you knowing. People were following you. They were determining who your loved ones are, who your family members are, who you're going to turn to for help, who your doctors are, who your clergy is, where you go to school, where you went to school, what your dreams are, and where you think you're going in life. All of that they know before they ever let you hear a voice one or feel an attack one. That's real important. Just so you know, the way I know all this is I do know who's doing this in the state of Texas and spent a king's ransom counter-surveilling these people. They do that through surveillance, and that's silent surveillance. That's not the surveillance that you know is going on. Once they know who you're going to turn to, they know who to control. There's no surprise that every one of you in this room, once you figured out you were being targeted, turned to a spouse, turned to a parent, turned to a close friend, and every one of those people looked at you and went, can't be. Why you? You're nobody. Why would they spend millions of dollars to follow you? Well, that's exactly who you experiment on. You experiment on the common people. You don't experiment on people that have the political clout or the financial clout to do something about it or have a voice in the presidency. That's never been that way. Throughout MKUltra, they experimented on counterculture, radicals, drug users, men using prostitutes. It's a broad spectrum, but it's never the elite that can change it. Then the stalking starts. And the stalking and the surveillance are side by side, but the stalking serves an important purpose. It puts you into a victim mind state, puts you into a fear state, like Nick Begich talked about. You can't stay in a state of fear. As long as you're in a state of fear, you'll never logically figure out your way out of this or how to be a successful advocate. The stalking serves a second purpose. If you're not chipped, we think that the stalking actually is 24/7 because it gives them a chance to actually get bioidentical markers on you, get EEG signatures, get DNA residence, get facial recognition, get body recognition. That's why you're being stalked. It's not strictly to harass you. It's to get other ways to actually track you. Defamation, you are going to see that. If people are stalking you 24/7, what are your neighbors going to think? Well, initially they're going to think that there's something criminal going on with you. So the way that the stalkers avoid that is they go to your neighbors and they tell them that we're the police, we're the FBI, this person's under surveillance. You'd be amazed, at least in the United States, I know we've been dumbed down there pretty well through public education, but your neighbors will amazingly believe a total stranger coming up to them showing a fake badge and saying, well, we're the FBI and we're watching this guy and we need your help. trust me, the FBI legitimately doesn't ever go to anybody and ask for help. They've got the surveillance equipment to watch you all on their own. And that's when the defamation starts. That's when they tell your neighbors you're a pedophile, you're a drug dealer, you're a trafficker, you're a human trafficker, you're in some type of legal trouble that justifies them being around your house and your work all the time. Then that's when usually the attacks start. The stalking will kind of limit itself. There's no longer any reason to stalk you once they have all the correct markers to track you. Then it's left with electronic harassment, voices, directed energy. And most people maybe suffer through that for a few years, and then believe it or not, even that tapers off. Now, according to from what we've seen from our counter surveillance, the rules of engagement are, once you're enrolled into one of these programs, you have to be watched for the rest of your natural life. You don't have to be attacked, but you do have to be watched. And the reason for that is, at some point, one of you may get a whisper in the right ear of somebody who wants to do something about this. So they have to watch it, because if you are that person that does get in with your chancellor, with your president, with the right attorney that can actually do something about this, the perpetrators, trust me, need to know that so they can side on you. And that's what we call maintenance. You know, where you're being watched, may not be attacked anymore, maybe once a week or so they'll zap you just to let you know they're still there. Some of you may be at that point, and that's from our research kind of what we've gleaned. These are some of the complaints that Peter went over pretty well too: the stalking, the defamation, vehicle tampering, device tampering. One of their favorites is they like to break into your house, take something apart, put it back together wrong. So you're the only one that notices. So when you come home, you say, well, they took my microwave apart, and look, 2 screws are in the wrong place. So you call the police, and the police come, and you say, yes, somebody broke in here, they left a cigarette burning, and they took that microwave apart, and they put it back together wrong. Look, it's broke. Well, I mean, I think all of you can see that sounds pretty crazy. In the United States especially, because they're going to assume you did that to yourself. It succeeds every time, because the more police reports you get, eventually the police write you off as crazy, and they don't send anybody, and that's exactly where the perpetrators want you, because they know they can safely break into your house and mess with you and physically assault you if they want to, and nobody's going to come to help. In Europe especially, that's a bad problem. In Texas, not a problem, because we'll shoot you back in Texas. Physical attack, audio harassment, that's the voices that you hear, and eventually what their goal is to get you psychiatrically diagnosed. But that is the end game in this. The end game in a broad picture is global control. You are the guinea pigs of a system that eventually wants to control everyone. What Robert Duncan refers to as hive mind thinking, where we all think alike, where we'll all want the same things, we'll all want the same political system, we'll all have the same loves and the same hates. A psycho-civilized society. But a psychiatric diagnosis is the goal in each individual, because once you have a psychiatric diagnosis, no one's going to listen to you. Even if you do happen to get a word into the right person or the right agency that can help you, they're going to look at your drug history, they're going to look at your psychiatric history. Point of attack. These are some of the things I tell people that can actually help, at least, I guess what the word would say, at least help be an advocate to others and help be an advocate to bring this to a stop. Live right. If you're using drugs or you're heavily using alcohol, try to stop, because they are going to use that against you every single time. As a matter of fact, the drug counterculture is specifically targeted, has been since MK Ultra, because they're self-discredited. Use advocacy groups. Don't try to convince people that don't know anything about this that it's happening and that it's real. At least start with your activism within advocacy groups so you're talking to other people that know what this is. EEG manipulation. Nick Begich touched on this a little bit with the binaural beats. If you go from the surmise that this is being done by altering the EEG, well, how's the best way to combat it? 2 ways. Jam the signal coming in or coming out of you, or alter your brain to where it's not as susceptible. Now, we are having success with jamming it, not with shielding, because most of this is ELF, it appears to be. It can't be shielded. We are having success with jamming it,
However, the problem with using wide spectrum jammers is it jams everything in the house. If it's a powerful enough one, it'll jam everything on the block or in your apartment building, which means no signals going in or going out. But people that are targeted do seem to get better when we have wide spectrum jammers around them. That's difficult to build, they take a lot of power, they're very expensive. The military uses them around Humvees. When our Humvees go down the roads of Iraq and Afghanistan, they're actually jamming signals all around them to prevent IEDs from going off. And it's the same type of jamming system that we're using in our Humvees. The other thing we found that works is reprogramming the brain. As I told you, the way Malik's patent worked and the way it continues to work is by inducing interference in the EEG. Your brain is supposed to work both hemispheres at the same frequency. If you get both hemispheres operating at different frequencies, you get an interference pattern. That interference pattern can be picked up, it can be heterodyned, and it can be retransmitted to you. So we've had a lot of success in actually using binaural beat programs to resynchronize both hemispheres of the brain so you're not as likely to be targeted. So it's not perfect, but if you can resynchronize the brain and resynchronize the EEG, you will see that the targeting becomes less. The other thing you have to do is not communicate back. The reason they talk to you 24/7, that's how they entrain you. And it's difficult to do, I know, to tell people, you know, you're constantly being bombarded with nasty things about you or where you're at in your surroundings and what you're doing and what you're thinking. And it's hard not to think your answers back. And you don't have to talk out loud. They can hear your thoughts. It is a form of synthetic telepathy. But if you stop responding, do your best to ignore it and not reply back, slowly that entrainment goes away and the targeting gets less. And a combination of that and using binaural beat programs we've had a lot of success with. Faraday cages, Holland shielding does make some really good Faraday tents. They're expensive. We haven't focused a lot on shielding because you can't walk around in society shielded. You know, you start walking around in a suit that's made out of dielectric material to shield you from frequencies, you're going to get the same result, and it's going to be a psychiatrist.
A car is a Faraday cage, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's why we haven't gone into shielding. Some of them work, some of them don't. It depends on exactly what you're being targeted with. And like I said, nothing shields ELF waves. Sometimes it will shield some of the directed energy, but not the ELF waves themselves. Stay employed. Use logical activism. That's real important. It's like Nick Begg said, you don't start at the top. Some of the things we've had success with, years ago, I met with Representative Jim Guest in Missouri. I met for a weekend. I laid out all of the research from MK Ultra all the way up to the current people that voicing complaints. He went in front of the Missouri legislation and he passed a law against microchipping. Then Michigan and several other states followed suit. That was after mine and Dr. Terry Robertson's meeting with Representative Jim Guest. Most recently, through ISA Act, we met with the City Council in Richmond, California, who actually recognized electronic harassment now as a crime there. They've been belittled in the major media in the United States, but so far they're hanging in there with their obligation to us. So logical activism, start low and slow, start with people that you know will believe you. Don't try to go right to the top. You're not going to write a letter to the CIA. Certainly don't write to the State Department in the United States. Letters like that are generated there will put you on a list. I've had a number of victims that sent somewhat aggressive letters to the State Department and to the CIA and to the FBI, and usually that'll get you a Secret Service member visiting you at your house to make sure you're not a threat to the president. Then you are on a list, and you're on a bad list. The other thing we found is free radical scavengers. As we heard our talk yesterday on the effects of electromagnetic radiation, one of the things that 24/7 EMF blocks is ornithine carboxylase. Ornithine carboxylase is needed in the body for phagocytosis of free radicals. Ornithine decarboxylase. It's actually an enzyme. This is a cellular enzyme that helps allow you to clear free radicals. When you're under constant bombardment with electromagnetic fields, you actually generate a lot of free radicals. Free radicals are destructive to the tissue of the body. premature aging, infertility, cataracts. There are free radical scavengers that you can use that will actually help you combat the onslaught of free radicals. Alpha lipoic acid, sublingual glutathione, vitamin D3 in relatively high doses. There's a number of them. Those are 3 of the top ones. But broader solutions to the problem is vote your ethics, not your party affiliation, at least in the United States. We need to find leaders that are actually friendly to the cause. Defunding of the programs that are actually doing the experimentation. Education of the psychiatric community, that's a big one, and that's one I haven't, even as a physician, haven't figured out quite how to do. It's going to take psychiatrists that are friendly to our cause to actually publish in their peer-reviewed journals to help with this. Political lobbying, Nick Begich and I both agree that political lobbying is going to be imperative, and that's somebody knocking on doors of legislatures saying this is happening, we need help with this, we need exposure, we need another church committee, we need another Rockefeller Commission. Unfortunately, that cost millions of dollars, which is why it hasn't been done so far. With our elected officials, push for intelligence agency oversight. And the biggest one, legislation against non-consensual experimentation. I don't know how it is in Europe. In the United States, there are no laws against the government experimenting on the public. We have a system of legislation called the Common Rule. And the Common Rule is a loosely fragmented bit of legislation that supposedly governs human experimentation. It has 4 distractors written into it that allow for government experimentation. One of them even says, if it's in the benefit of the experimentation, to notify the experimentees after the fact, which if you look at the United States government, typically what we've done is experiment on the Tuskegee men with syphilis. 40 years later, the media exposes it, they get an apology. Experiment on people in New Mexico and Arizona with radioactive clouds. They're dying of radiation sickness, but they're being told they're crazy, not sick. Until Clinton comes into power, we have the acre hearings, they're given a lame apology. Most recently, the citizens of Guatemala were experimented on, the media exposed it, Hillary came out with a big apology, we had the Bioethics Commission's hearings. I spoke at one of the Bioethics Commission's hearings. The board was filled with apologists from the government. They thought the Common Rule was adequate in protecting U.S. citizens from experimentation. 6 meetings, over 1,000 people in the public forum, at each meeting voicing concerns of electronic harassment. Every one of them in the public forum was complaining of electronic harassment. In the end, 6 meetings, a letter saying no evidence of non-consensual experimentation ongoing in the United States or abroad. So we need government change. This is just real quick, we've got a few minutes. One of the ways they might be doing some of this too is with continuous wave radar. It actually will stimulate things. This is quantum theory. This is some of the NSA implants they're using. iOS, NSA says they can infect it every time. Next slide. This is a cottonmouth implant. In the United States, before we can buy computers or phones, they're interdicted by the NSA. This is installed into those computers and phones before they're available for purchase. This is a cottonmouth implant. Next slide. This is the howler monkey implant. Next slide. These are howler monkey motherboards. These are put into computers, PCs, cell phones. The cottonmouth is actually put into the cord that goes from your computer to your screen. When those chips are bombarded with continuous wave radar, they will transmit all of your data up to 6 kilometers away to a receiving station. Those in the United States, you know that all of these towers have popped everywhere that nobody claims. They're receiving towers. The government says they're not theirs, but they are picking up cell phone signals. They're receiving stations, and no matter where you live in the United States now, you're within 6 kilometers of one. So all your data can go to one. Rage Master Video, this goes from the cord between your computer and your monitor. Again, it uses continuous wave radar. No one is sure how safe it is to be sitting at your computer and be bombarded with this much energy, and it's a lot to do this. And we think that it might be using the same way on the human brain. My website, drjohnrhall.com. Our logo, be a hard target, smart activism, governmental change. Thanks for coming. Remember, you guys are the front line of this battle. One of the things we are doing to educate the public, remember, it's important to educate the non-targeted public. Advocacy groups, so you're talking to other people that know what this is. We decided not to do. My first book is being done into a drama based on a true story. That way more untargeted people come to see it. You're the first to actually see the trailer.
Why is my girlfriend not being targeted? Scared off technology?
Your job